Do you own stock? Have you ever wondered where that word comes from? Not stock as in inventory, stock as in shares, as in the stock market. The word comes from a stick of wood. Specifically, the longer half of a split tally stick, which was given to the person who held the financial claim, the stockholder. For 726 years, that is how England tracked debt, recorded taxes, and ran its economy. Not with banks, not with paper, with notched pieces of hazelwood that were split in half to prevent forgery. One half for the creditor, one half for the debtor. The grain of the wood matched so perfectly that counterfeiting was physically impossible. This system built the British Empire. Then, in 1834, they burned every last stick of it and accidentally destroyed Parliament in the process. I found this while researching something else entirely. I was looking into the origins of financial terminology, trying to understand why we use the words we use for money and investment. Etymology is often a ghost that preserves what documents do not. And when I traced the word stockholder back to its roots, I found myself staring at a currency system that predates the Bank of England by nearly 6 centuries. A system so successful it ran continuously from 1100 AD until 1826. A system whose physical records were then deliberately destroyed. The more I dug, the stranger the story became. In 1100, King Henry I, son of William the Conqueror, introduced the tally stick system to England. The mechanics were elegant in their simplicity. A stick of hazelwood, roughly as long as the span between thumb and forefinger, would be notched to indicate amounts. The dialogue concerning the exchequer, a 12th century administrative manual, lays out the denominations precisely. A cup the thickness of a palm represented 1,000. The breadth of a thumb meant 100. The breadth of the little finger meant 20. A single pound was marked by a cut the width of a swollen barley corn. A shilling was narrower still. A penny was a single cut that removed no wood at all. Once notched, the stick was split lengthwise through the markings. The longer piece, called the stock, went to the person who had advanced money or paid taxes. The shorter piece, called the foil, went to the data or the crown. Because the split followed the natural grain of the wood, the two halves could only match each other. No two sticks split identically. Forgery was not merely difficult. It was physically impossible for 700 years. Now, I should be clear about something. This was not a perfect system. It was not magic money that avoided all economic problems. King Charles II managed to abuse it catastrophically in 1672, defaulting on over £1.3 million and destroying several prominent banking families in what became known as the Great Stop of the Exchequer. The goldsmith bankers who had trusted the crown found their tally sticks suddenly worthless. At least 5 major banking houses went bankrupt. Over 10,000 wealthy families were, in the language of the time, financially embarrassed. Charles himself later admitted it was a false step. So, I'm not suggesting the tally system was beyond manipulation or abuse. What I am noting is what happened next. That crisis led directly to the creation of the Bank of England in 1694. And here is where the story becomes strange. The Bank of England was founded specifically to prevent future defaults, like the stop of the Exchequer. It was capitalized with a loan of £1.2 million to the government, and subscribers were incorporated as the governor and company of the Bank of England. But the first shareholders did not pay for their shares with gold or silver. They paid with tally sticks. The Bank Act of 1697 allowed up to 80% of the bank's capital increases to be paid in tallies. The system that would eventually replace tally sticks was literally bootstrapped by tally sticks. The new financial order was purchased with the currency of the old. I keep returning to that detail because it suggests something about the relationship between these systems that the official history tends to obscure. For another century and more, tallies continued. By the 1730s, they had become the dominant form of government finance. A scholar named Mitchell Innes noted that practically the entire business of the English exchequer consisted in the issuing and receiving of tallies. They were not primitive. They were sophisticated. They circulated in secondary markets. They were discounted and traded. They functioned as government bonds, tax receipts, and currency simultaneously. And they required no central institution to create them. The Crown issued them. The Crown accepted them for taxes. That acceptance created demand. That demand gave them value. The system was self-enforcing. Then in 1782, Parliament passed an act declaring that tally sticks would be phased out. But there was a clause. The act would only take effect once the remaining sinecure holders in the exchequer died or retired. The last exchequer chamberlain did not die until 1826. For 44 years, the system lingered in bureaucratic limbo. Not quite alive, not quite dead. And during that time, 6 centuries' worth of tally sticks accumulated in storage at the Palace of Westminster. 2 cartloads of notched hazelwood representing the financial history of medieval and early modern England. Tax receipts from the reign of Henry II, debt records from the 100 Years' War, evidence of how commerce functioned before banking, as we understand it, existed. On October 16, 1834, Richard Whaley, the Clerk of Works at Parliament, received instructions to dispose of these accumulated tallies. He decided against giving them away as firewood to the poor families who lived nearby. Instead, he ordered them burned in the 2 heating furnaces beneath the House of Lords. 2 Irish labourers, Joshua Cross and Patrick Furlong, were assigned the task. They began at dawn and continued throughout the day, feeding 700 years of financial records into the flames. Throughout the afternoon, Mrs. Wright, the deputy housekeeper, noticed excessive heat and smoke. She became puzzled by how warm the floors were becoming, but the workers insisted on finishing. The furnaces were extinguished by 5 in the evening. By 6, flames were licking through the floor of the House of Lords. The copper lining of the chimney flue had melted. The fire spread with terrifying speed. By 6:30 that evening, a massive fireball had exploded through the roof of Parliament. It became the largest fire in London between the Great Fire of 1666 and the Blitz of the Second World War. The King and Queen could see the flames from Windsor Castle 20 miles away. Both the House of Commons and the House of Lords were destroyed. Westminster Hall survived only through heroic firefighting and a fortunate shift in the wind. The damage was estimated at $2 million. The building was uninsured. No one was prosecuted. Prime Minister Viscount Melbourne called it one of the greatest instances of stupidity upon record. 21 years later, Charles Dickens addressed the Administrative Reform Association and described the sequence of events with acid precision. He mocked what he called the obstinate adherence to an obsolete custom. He noted that when the question of replacing tallies with paper records had first been raised, all the red tape in the country grew redder at the bare mention of this bold and original conception. And it took from 1782 until 1826 just to abolish the sticks. Then it took another 8 years to burn them. And in burning them, they destroyed the seat of government itself. Dickens found this grimly appropriate. The bureaucracy that could not reform itself managed to set itself on fire. But here is the detail that disturbs me most. In 1850, just 16 years after the fire, Alfred Smythe, the resident surgeon at the Bank of England, reported something remarkable. He had been investigating the few surviving tally sticks in the bank's possession, trying to understand how they had been read. His conclusion was blunt. No gentleman in the Bank of England recollects the mode of reading them. 726 years of continuous use. 16 years of total forgetting. The physical records were gone. The institutional memory was gone. Only the etymology remained. Our stockholder. The ghost of a system preserved in language while the evidence burned. Maybe I am seeing patterns where none exist. Maybe the destruction was exactly what it appeared to be. Bureaucratic incompetence and nothing more. The simplest explanation is often correct. A clerk made a stupid decision. Workers were careless. Ancient wood burned too hot. Parliament caught fire. Tragic, but explicable. Except I cannot stop thinking about the timing. The Bank of England was founded in 1694. Tally sticks were abolished in 1826. The evidence was burned in 1834. Within 140 years of central banking, the physical proof of how money worked before central banking was gone. The institutional memory of reading tallies was gone within 20 years after that. By 1850, no one could even interpret the surviving specimens. What system of commerce functioned successfully for over 7 centuries and then became unreadable within a single generation of its abolition? What financial records were deemed so obsolete that burning was preferable to preservation? Why did no one think to keep specimens for historical study before lighting the furnaces? The British Museum existed. The Royal Society existed. Antiquarian scholarship was flourishing. Yet 2 cartloads of primary source documents for medieval English economic history were fed into furnaces by laborers paid to finish the job quickly. And the building where that decision was made burned to the ground as a result. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The vocabulary of modern finance is haunted by wooden sticks. Stockholder. We still speak of going long and going short. Terms that originally described which half of the tally you held. The longer piece meant you were owed. The shorter piece meant you owed. Every time you check your stock portfolio, you are using a word that means a split piece of hazelwood with notches carved into it. The language remembers what the documents do not. Some will say this is merely interesting history, a quirky footnote about medieval accounting. But I think about Alfred Smythe, standing in the Bank of England in 1850, holding a tally stick no one alive could read, trying to reconstruct a system that had been universal knowledge just 25 years earlier. I think about the furnaces beneath the House of Lords, burning so hot they melted copper and set fire to the floors above. I think about the pattern of documents destroyed, knowledge lost, institutional memory erased, and a new system stepping into the gap left behind. What if the most successful currency experiment in European history was not superseded by something better? What if it was simply forgotten? Not through conspiracy, just through negligence, through burning the records rather than studying them, through assuming that modern is always better than ancient, through failing to ask why a system worked for 700 years before discarding it entirely. The questions remain. Why burn rather than preserve? Why did forgetting happen so quickly? What else was recorded on those tallies that we will never know? And why, when you look at the language of modern finance, does every word point back to pieces of wood that someone decided to destroy? I do not have answers. Only the questions. Only the patterns. Only the ghost of a system that survived 7 centuries and could not survive 20 years of institutional forgetfulness. The etymology remembers the documents burned, and Parliament itself went up in flames on the night they decided to erase the evidence.